I'll start actually with Jefferson. I'll give him first run here. The chapter that deals with Thomas Jefferson actually talks about political gossip, which, to my surprise, when I began looking at the letters of this founding generation, these national politicians, I discovered that not only were they gossiping all the time, but they were very conscious of it, and they seemed to be following rules. Like you could gossip about some things, but not others, and there were certain ways in which you could drop information. They called it dropping and collecting, were their words for this process of dealing with political gossip. So the idea was really intriguing to me, and when I began thinking about it, lo and behold, it occurred to me that Thomas Jefferson recorded every piece of political gossip he ever heard when he was Secretary of State, and he collected them all together into a volume which, when his papers were published, was titled The Annus. So essentially, I had this wonderful gossip log that Thomas Jefferson provided me with that I could analyze and interpret and really get a sense of what it was these people were saying about each other and what it was they hoped to accomplish by saying it. So Thomas Jefferson is my way of basically explaining political gossip. I don't know if he'd be particularly happy about that distinction, but he does a wonderful job of really showing what politicians were doing at their dinner tables. In the case of Jefferson, part of what you discover when you really look at this politics of gossip and what's happening at their dinner tables, you discover that he was a dinner table politician. That is where he shined. That was really the way he accomplished a lot of what he attempted to do as a politician throughout his political career. He was a master of dinner table politicking. Not only did he know how to set the stage perfectly, he was known for having wonderful wines and the best food, French, of course, so people enjoyed having dinner with him, but he also really knew how to set the stage so that conversation would turn, and that's his word, turn towards key topics that happened to be perhaps on the agenda for Congress in the next week. So, for example, he talks about, and what's wonderful is he records in great detail all of his dinners and every little piece of information people drop for him. He talks about, in one case, a dinner where he just happened to invite the key congressmen who were about to vote on the question of whether Congress should refer matters to Alexander Hamilton and seek his advice, which is something that they had been doing for a while up until that point. Clearly, this is not something that Thomas Jefferson was very happy about, and he thought, well, if I can cut that off at the root, I can cut off a lot of Hamilton's power and a lot of problems are going to be solved. So lo and behold, he has a dinner party, and he invites over the key congressmen whose votes are sort of on the fence, and they have an entire dinner in which they say nothing about politics. They talk about everything else. They talk about the city, they talk about France, they talk about whatever else. He normally would set out little things on the table that would sort of strike people into having some kind of an interesting moment of conversation. So they traveled along those lines, and at the end of the evening, somehow or other, he managed to get these three key congressmen to stay at the table. And as he put it, the conversation turned to a congressional referendum to the Secretary of the Treasury. And as it magically turned in this direction, he let it be known that he thought this was a very bad thing. And after they left, he wrote on a little tiny slip of paper. Those of you who have seen Jefferson's handwriting, he has this sort of very neat, meticulous, very small handwriting when he wants it to be, and in this case he did. Little slip of paper, and he wrote each guy's name, and he wrote what the guy thought about congressional referendums, and they all agreed with him and said, bad, it's a bad thing. So he watched them, he tracked them. And every time the issue came up in Congress or a related issue came up, he'd go back to that same sheet of paper and he'd record what these three particular gentlemen did in relation to it. And ultimately, when it wasn't defeated, and Hamilton maintained that ability to refer, to suggest to Congress basically what he was doing was suggesting legislation, he recorded why this had fallen through, who had fallen through, who had not stayed true to the cause that they'd essentially vouched for at his dinner party. It's an amazing little piece of paper that he records this on, but it really shows you how important these dinner parties